Welcome to those interested to come see our business today, and likewise people online. Thank you for your interest in our work. I'd like to give a particular welcome in the meeting to Raghav Basin, who's here. Raghav's on the Aspiring Chief Executives, the programme, and doing a lot of work with Peter, and is here to observe our business today. Welcome, Raghav. Right. We go straight into patient story, Dave.
Thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues. Just as an introduction to today's patient story, we're going to hear from a patient and an ex-member of staff called Linda. And today's patient story is giving us an example and an experience of someone who has used our services and has received what we would and what she has described as really good clinical care, and for all intents and purposes has had a good clinical outcome. However, what Linda's story demonstrates is that care is more than just that clinical input, and that the holistic care of somebody will give them a much richer and better opportunity to recover and to live their lives in the future. The whole issue that comes out is that by providing holistic support, it gives people the opportunity to have home and social contact, and that directly impacts on people's ability to recover and thrive. I'll give some warnings that the story continues, but does mention issues relating to loss, emotional distress, suicidal thoughts.
I have retired from the Royal and come back part-time. Worked in the NHS for over 40 years as a secretary. I have one daughter and 2 grandchildren and no other family. A few years ago, having a routine mammogram, I got recalled and found out that I had the early stages of breast cancer. I had to have an operation, which was done at Broad Green with wonderful staff. But just after my operation, my daughter came to me and told me that she and my grandchildren and her partner were moving to America because she'd got back in touch with the father she'd never seen. So during the treatment for cancer, I lost my family. So I lived alone and I suffered greatly with the side effects of the cancer treatment. I went through it all. I have a great breast nurse. A couple of years later, I was at the lowest ebb I've ever been because I had no one here, no family. Had friends, but my little granddaughter, who I'd seen every day of her life at the age of 7, was taken away. On the 18th of December last year, I found out about the Cancer Cafe, and looking very dishevelled because at that point I'd reached such a low point in my life. I didn't see a reason to live because what I had to live for had gone. My boss was going to come with me to the Cancer Cafe, but she went first, so I had to go on my own. And the way it was set out, it was like a board table, and they were all at one end, and I'd never met them. And I walked in and sat down and said to them, I don't really want to talk about what's wrong with me because nobody can help me. And they were such kind people. I found myself at the end agreeing to have a 15-minute therapy, which is the emotional freedom technique with the lovely Maria. But before I went into the room with her, I felt I had to tell her a bit of background. What none of them knew was that I had arranged my death. I knew what I was going to do, and I knew when I was going to do it. I went into a room for 15 minutes with one of these therapists, and I came out of that room a completely different person. I mattered. I had a group around me who were offering support on an ongoing basis. I was facing a Christmas alone and living alone, and they knew none of this. But I went home and I burnt the letters I'd left for the people who would find them. I flushed away the tablets I was going to use, and I began to heal. And I came back the next day, all washed, with my hair done, lippy on, and I started to live again. And then I got every therapy they could possibly give me: reflexology, Reiki, the tapping technique, which for me is the most wonderful thing. Now, I accept that you have to accept the services of Macmillan when you are ready for them. And I can say categorically that entering that cafe that day, they saved my life. And I would recommend anybody to give it a go when they feel ready. These people are actually lifesavers. And I had to go into my doctor through the week for a checkup, and he said to me, "I am amazed you're not on antidepressants." And I said to him, "I'm under the care of Macmillan and I don't need antidepressants." And I think that should be spread far and wide throughout our Hill Trust. We should give these wonderful people designated rooms, because these people can pull you from the depth. I know I can walk in their office at any time and I can get supported. And one of the things they support me with is, once my family left, there was no one to give me a hug at any time. And they became my designated huggers. We have a wonderful service here, and I really don't think it's recognised for the benefits it provides, and for the therapists who give their time free of charge, and for the people who give their time and energy to produce these cancer cafes. It needs to be broadcast from the rooftops. And I will be forever grateful that I walked in that room that day and met those people who I met. And I can honestly say I've never felt as low as that day ever again, because I know I may not have family, but I have them.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda and David, for bringing the story forward. Very powerful. The parent, is there anything that you want to say?
No, I guess the message is that we provide lots of opportunities for holistic services that we don't always recognise. We don't always count that impact. We count lots of things about the care that we do provide, but some of the most important and impactful things that our organisation does and does in partnership, we don't always recognise that as being one of the core issues that the services that we provide.
Thank you. Any reflections from members of the board wish to share? Natalie.
Just picking up at the end, Linda mentioned around dedicated space for holistic therapies. Thank you, Mike. And one of the long-standing issues that's moved in the new Royal is our cancer wellbeing service, of which the therapists you mentioned are part of, have been running out of the outpatient department, which is shared with many of the clinics. I met with estates yesterday, and there is now a plan for a dedicated holistic area within the Linda McCartney Centre, which we will have in place by December. So hopefully that as well should support this and make improvements for our patients.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks again, David. Into the agenda today, we've an agenda partly due to the timing of the meeting, with some very significant several, in fact, annual report statements, annual reports from statutory body, looked at annual reports from statutory body, Liverpool Women's Hospital across a range of quality and safety and estates issues. It's important that we give full consideration to all of those. We'll start with the minutes of the last time we were together in this format, which was on the 11th of July. So any points anyone wishes to raise about the accuracy of the minutes? Any questions? Nice. Yeah, can I spend just to approve the minutes? Thank you. And we have a number of items on the rolling action tracker, Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. There are 4 actions. I'll just go through them in order. First one was we were hoping to have a patient story on organ donation and transplantation at today's meeting. The clinical team asked us to put it back a couple of months, and they're now due to come and present the patient story at November's meeting. The second one, action 15, is in relation to providing an update to board members on the new operational guidance and standards. That's scheduled for the October workshop of board members. The action 16, which is on sexual safety training, details are in the comments section of the tracker, which show the compliance both within Love and within Liverpool Women's Hospital. And obviously, if there are any questions on that, Pip will be glad to answer any questions board members may have. And then the last one, action 17, which was just to provide an update on when the various strategies will be going through the strategy and partnership committee. Details are there on which strategies are due to be considered in September and also November. So happy to take any questions on those actions.
Thank you. Any points anyone wishes to raise? It's all very clear when things come back. Thank you. Thanks, Daniel. Right, Chief Executive Officer report.
Chair, just a few things to update on this one. Obviously, the report highlights a number of issues. I'll pick up key things, but I just wanted to make sure the board were aware of them. Stronger Together work, which is listed in the paper, which is the words we're now using to describe the last programme of the private trust. The clinical reference group, which is chaired by Andy Nicholson, Medical Director at Walton, has now identified 6 clinical models as a priority for transformation going forward, and those are listed. So cardiology, respiratory, stroke, pain, spinal and women's services, and all of those are being looked at by the CRG as their first priorities. You can see with a lot of those, that's why we've got multiple services across separate organisations. So cardiology is obviously running across Aintree Royal, Liverpool Heart and Chest, and also community services. We've got already good and really improved work on stroke between Walton and Aintree, but as the regional centre, but also stroke patients attend other parts of our organisation as well. Pain and spinal, obviously, the link again with Walton. And women's services. Now, just to be clear, the women's services review that Cheshire and Mersey ICB are doing will determine what the future of all that looks like. But right now, some of the safety work that we've already been doing between the women's and the Royal will continue in that vein to try and improve things as much as we can ahead of that consultation if that's required. On the second item, was just around the Liverpool Heart and Chest. So obviously, Liverpool Heart and Chest are within the same leadership structure as Aintree, Royal, Broad Green, Liverpool Women's. So we've now amended our internal management arrangements there. So the Heart and Chest will have a hospital leadership team that covers both the Heart and Chest and Broad Green Hospital. The rationale for that being that it is effectively one hospital and always has been until a line was drawn down the middle and it was split into 2 separate trusts. It makes a lot of sense to manage that as a single site. So the hospital leadership team have now been appointed. Jonathan Matthews, who has been appointed as the Executive Managing Director, and he was previously the Deputy Chief Executive and Chief Operating Officer at Liverpool Heart and Chest. So we're welcoming Jonathan into that role in October. He is just going through the final process of recruiting his hospital leadership team. Those roles have all been protected within the last arrangement, so everybody's been able to apply for those. So we'll be able to announce those, I would think, at the next meeting. So we'll be able to share more on that soon. What we're doing right now is Nat Hudson, as the Exec Managing Director of Royal and Broad Green, is working with Jonathan about how Broad Green transitions into that leadership team over the next month. And we're working through all of the development points that you would expect about in the same way that we've done with the CQC final inspection report links are in there, but they didn't mention a few times, so I won't run those again, but we've now got all of the final reports linked, so public can click on those and see what each of them say. I also wanted to just highlight the Handover 45 launch, which is around Type 1 emergency department ambulance handover times. And I know that will have been discussed in the Assurance Risk Committee last week as part of the urgent care updates. Obviously, elective challenges, urgent care challenges, financial challenges were discussed in detail at the Assurance Risk Committee, and you can see that in the report, so I won't go over those again. But we will hear later on about the collective finance challenge as Rob does his report. I wanted also just to mention a couple of things that aren't in the report due to timing, but you may well have seen that the national publication of league tables, which is something the government and the 10-year plan had indicated would be coming, was launched on Monday. Those league tables now effectively take a number of metrics across all of the organisations in the country, and they do two things really. The first one is the league table publication effectively gives a ranking of where the trusts sit or the hospitals sit in relation to everybody else, a sort of peer benchmarking exercise. And then separate to that, the trusts are put into a segment rating of 1 to 5. 5 being what was previously the sort of turnaround special measures type regime where intervention is required, and 1 to 4 a gradient to that. Now, the important thing around the national rankings and the segmentation is to understand that any trust that has a financial deficit can't be higher than 3. So if you've got a deficit position, which a lot of trusts have, you can't be higher than 3. In terms of the rankings, Liverpool University Hospitals has ranked 115 out of 134, and Liverpool Women's has ranked 68 out of 134. Luft is in segment 4, Women's is in segment 3. So the key things that drive the Luft position are finances clearly, but also the access to care metrics, often the long waits for elective, which again, I know was discussed in the Assurance Risk Committee last week. Key challenges at Aintree, Royal, Broad Green, and the Women's, all parts of those reports. And the key challenge, the Women's being again finance, and again those long waits for some of the. So that aligns very neatly with what our improvement plans and our IPR are saying, so it's not a huge surprise. We are still seeking further information about how those tables will be updated. We know they'll be reviewed every quarter and updated, but to now they don't seem to take much of the CQC rating metrics into account, which I think if they did, given the recent CQC scores, would see as improved. So we're seeking further guidance on that. At the same time, the inpatient survey was launched, and for all trusts, the CQC inpatient survey. And again, there'll be more detail in the next board report. But what we get is a letter that tells us where we sit ahead of publication. And Luft and Liverpool Women's, pleased to say, were both positive outliers, better than expected in both counts. I haven't got the numbers for both organisations yet. I'm aware the Luft ranking, I think it was 25 out of 119. But I haven't got the Women's ranking yet, but both were in best than expected category. So from a patient experience perspective, that's really important and very pleasing. So I think as we start to move into this new phase now of understanding the rankings tables, the segmentation, it's all part of this drive towards a new way of managing things. The model region guidance was launched again on, I think it was Monday night, so ahead of, post presentation of this report. So we're starting to see how this will work now in the new world and how we'll be able to account by region. So it doesn't change anything. Our priorities are the same. The improvement plans around elective, urgent care and the financial recovery plans will be the things that will move us in the right directions in those tables. But good to get some assurance that from a patient's experience perspective and a quality perspective and a safety perspective, none of those things apply them for either trust when it comes to the rankings. So we know what we need to do, so we just need to now get on with that. There's some links in the communications that have come out recently to stakeholders that People can click on it, give more detail. Beth did a presentation with staff brief around the oversight framework and how all that works. We will do a refresh with the board ahead of probably the next meeting, just to try and link up that oversight framework and how this all comes together with our performance reporting and board meetings and our assurance risk committee. Other than that, there's some stuff in the report just around where the provider collaborative work's going, but there's still lots to do to get us where we need to get to. And I think the other main thing I would have touched on is support that we're going to be commissioning around the improvements of our financial position and the risks around that. We're not going to cover that in the finance report a bit later on. So I'll pause actually.
Thank you. As we've discussed here or reflected on here previously, for those of us who have been around the block on these things quite a few times, and there's different performance regimes, there's star ratings, there's a whole lot of things that try and get some relative understanding of where it's going well and where it's going less well. And it's very tempting when I was very disappointed with the scores about and Liverpool women instinctively when I saw them. And I think it's because it's hard to reconcile the evidence-based progress that we've made in a whole lot of ways, vindicated and reflected in the regulators' reports that we've seen, which are referenced here in James's report, on the good ratings from CQC, the well-led. We've worked hard to make progress on all of those things. And when we've compared ourselves previously within Cheshire and Mersey, it's given our relative position within Cheshire and Mersey, I think, has given us some false assurance about our relative performance, which when you put it into a national context is less positive. Someone from the line in the system contacted me to say, what does the board think about the ratings? And usually people come up with, but if only the CQC stuff was got there. I didn't say any of that. I simply said the board continues to be both agitated and determined to continue to make progress in doing our best for the patients we serve within the resources that are available. And I think that determination which we have and which we continue to need to show how our relative performance continues to improve as we go forward, and our expectation that in future quarterly updates of the ratings that we can that reflects the progress that we've been making and we continue to need to deliver on. So that was that. I do think that an important part of this big picture, James referred to the work across the 5 last trusts that the clinical group with Andy Nicholson are working on, and those clinical areas. And some of the work that's emerging from that reflects the way in which the fragmentation of services across the city between sites and crucially between organisations has somehow meant that these things which on the face of it we could do better for patients for whatever reason over the years gone by haven't been able to be achieved. We have an opportunity now and a duty to focus on those, and I do think that the integration and the alignment of services more effectively across the different sites, the different organisations that we currently are coming together in group will have an impact in a number of areas, both on access and outcome of service, and hopefully that progression of that work will be part of our ongoing improvement in Blood and Liverpool women's. So No, we are there. There's papers here, as James said, that refer to the considerations that we had last week and the previous month in Assurance Risk Committee. I'm going to ask, I'll open up in a moment for other thoughts, reflections or questions to James. And after that, I'll come back, if I may, to Natalie, Peter and Jenny for any real-time updates since the ARC meeting on latest data, just reflections on are we making the progress on the long waiter issues that we discussed last week? What's the temperature check on our emergency services right at the moment, because it's been busy? And then the financial issues that we'll pick up in Rob's agenda item on the report. But before I come to the executive managing directors, for other questions or points that board members wish to make, the range of issues in James's report. Mike first.
Thank you. Thanks both for the way that's on the league tables. Thank you for the way you set it. I think it's very easy to get defensive about these things. I think it's a morale question, really. There's loads of people doing really good work, working really hard, and then you find £115, £130, or whatever. It's never good to see yourself in that position. Has it impacted on morale, we think, and what's we doing to try and keep people motivated and consider for something? I think the honest answer is probably people are less concerned about that and more concerned about vacancy freezes from a morale perspective. I think that's if you sort of have the biggest issue that's the affecting morale of the organisation most involved is more around the financial constraints. So yeah, I'm sure it's not helped, but I think the vacancy freeze. This is why when we keep talking about why the Stronger Together support is getting to a clear design for corporate services across the 5 organisations and implementing it should with the ability to cease the vacancy freeze process for a huge number of staff. This corporate where the vacancy freezes are, so I think our corporate departments probably feel it the most of it. So no, we've not had any sort of major feedback or reactions in the team briefs around the rankings as such. It's been more about the ongoing challenge of when are we going to get the corporate services sorted out so we can end the vacancy free issues. That's our big priority. I think the other important thing is that it coming out at the same time as the patient surveys helps, I think, temper some of the slip off. Look, it's not great to be in anything, is it? But at the same time, that being around financial constraint rather than quality, safety and standards of care, I think staff would honestly feel it's the best worst case scenario, if that makes sense. Where we've really got to work hard in this next month, and we've got to, I met with the staff governors, excuse me, a few weeks ago, and what they asked for, what was an excellent suggestion, was for the next step brief that we did, almost to be that reset of, look, how do all these things come together now? Because everybody's in this slightly confused world of the NHS has completely turned on its head in the last 6 months. ICBs don't do what they do anymore. Regions are doing something different. There's all sorts of imposed financial things, but no one's sure whether it's the trust doing it or the ICB doing it or the region doing it or how it all works. So the government's talked about, can we just have a bit of a reset that says these are the things that are okay, we've improved and they're doing well. These are the things that are still causing us problem, and here's what we're doing about it. Just get stepped back into that. Right, we understand that we need to resolve, so we're going to do that at our next step, which would be another helpful way to try and sort of deal with that issue.
Okay, no more points straight away. I've just asked for those temperature check updates from Natalie, Peter and Jenny in that order.
Yeah, so from a royal perspective, elective performance is strong and we're meeting the national standards. We haven't got the 65-week wait issues and we are within the 1% of the total waiting list being 52 weeks or over. The main challenge at the Royal relates to cancer pathways and faster diagnosis standard. A lot of our tune groups sit under the Royal services. We haven't had the validated position yet for July, but first look at it is around 76% achievement, which is about a 1% improvement on the previous month. The two tumour groups that are most challenged are urology and gastroenterology, and as we discussed at ARC, they are the two services that we have supported the business cases to expand the substantive workforce. So through Transformation Board and the monthly ARC updates, we'll be bringing back improvement trajectories for those tumour groups, and over coming months, the trajectory we expect the faster diagnosis standard to improve back. From an urgent and emergency care perspective, September it has started off slightly more challenged. In August, we at the Royal, 3% of ambulances were turned around over 45 minutes. So really strong ambulance handover performance, and we met the 10% standard for the 12 hours in department or more, which was the best 12-hour performance we've had in ED in over 3 years. So really strong in August. From September, the not meeting criteria to be desired position has slipped slightly, so that's where the focus is. But our transfer of care is scheduled to go live on the 22nd of this month, and as we've talked about through the board, that's a significant development for us. So we are working with system partners on that, with the aim that we'll then be able to further improve the not meeting criteria to be desired.
Thanks, that's it, Pete.
Thank you. So if I start with this elective performance in entry, so the key issue for entry remains the 65-week wait position. As we know, that challenges an ENT and max fax predominantly. We have set ourselves a trajectory. In August, the position is improving, and we are ahead of our recovery trajectories. There's 135 patients waiting 65 weeks at the end of August. In terms of cancer performance, the performance is strong in entry. There's just a slight slip back in MFT. We've set recovery trajectories on MFU, sorry, and MFU are ahead of those trajectories, so I'm not concerned about cancer performance. A similar picture really in terms of the urgent and emergency care performance. August saw improvement in the key metrics, so for our standard was 52% in entry for August, which is the highest it's been for about 14 months. Ambulance handover position also improved in August down to 30 minutes, which was a significant improvement. And we've moved up the benchmarking league, so a little bit in entry from that perspective. And 12 hours as the department also improved down to 48%. Some days we were hitting 10%, but the average over the month was 14%. So still a little bit of work to do there. Actually, an interesting picture has emerged in the last 6 weeks in the entry where there's been more attendances. But not from ambulances, actually. So it's been more walk-in attendances. I wondered, was that the Sudoku? But actually, we've seen improvement in both admitted and non-admitted performance. I don't think it is. So I think James got to tell me I'm wrong with that.
No, not at all. No, not at all. I was going to ask if you, just for members of the public, if you just explain Sudoku and MFU.
Sorry, MFU is the maxillofacial unit. It's one of our care groups, and Sudoku is our same-day urgent care unit where you get urgent care, but not emergency care. And so that's to explain that. So, but there's an interesting picture emerging of the last 6 weeks, which we are looking into in terms of those increased attendance at ED that aren't ambulance transfers. In terms of no criteria to reside, there was an improvement in August down to one of the lowest levels we've been for some time. But as Nat said, the beginning of September, we're just beginning to see in terms of pressure at the front door and discharge through into the community. So we are working closely with our system partners on that, particularly SEPT and other piece of work for us to try and target particularly pathway through patients related to residential care. So we're focusing heavily on that, but I'll pause there on that increase.
Thank you, and Jen.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so our cancer performance, while still under where it needs to be, is going to improve again, which is really encouraging. That's been through support from the group corporate ops team. Our latest unvalidated FDS position, faster diagnosis standard position was 64%, so moving back towards where it needs to be. We flagged in Audit and Risk Committee the issues in terms of our elective performance and the continued decline in that. We are recognising that our waiting list is becoming a bigger issue and that we have been placed into tier 2 from that perspective. And just to note that we do remain in tier 1 for cancer. So we've been working with the division, with the gynaecology division, and we recognise that in previous years we've used insourcing to help clear some of that waiting list, which we haven't had in the plan. for this year. We are planning to do that through normal capacity and also through our additional ambulatory capacity, which opened this week. That will give us an extra 25 to 30 procedures a week, which is currently weighted at about 80% cancer, 20% elective, but we will look at that template as we move forward. We've also requested the intensive support team to come in and have a look at our waiting list management, as well as through the tier 2 performance meetings we've had nationally. And we've also agreed with the division that they will do additional sessions in-house, as well as some outsourcing and sourcing that we are going to have to procure to manage this waiting list. We believe that we can do that within the financial plan, provided that we can be paid up to £1.8 million for that activity through outsourcing and not through our own individual performance and capacity. So there is a plan for our elective performance, and we will report back on that next month.
Thank you. Beth?
Thank you, Chair. Natalie referenced we haven't got the confirmed figures, and you asked whether things had improved since ARC, and they have. So for Luft and for the women's, in fact, the percentage improvement is exactly the same. The FDS performance, which is patients receiving, not only being seen, but also receiving their diagnosis within 28 days, it has improved by 5% at Luft and 5% at the women's, June to July. And for 62-day performance, which is anybody referred on a cancer pathway, having their treatment before 62 days, we have also improved at Luft and the women's by 4% in that 4-week period. I think it's also worth noting that Pete has just referenced the long waiters, and whilst that is not accepted as a position we want to be in, we were 40 under trajectory, so the team done a sterling job in driving the numbers down of 65-week waits in that period. And just to note as well, for Cheshire and Merseyside, we account for 17% of the long waiters. So given our size, I just thought the context might be helpful. Thank you.
It's very helpful, thanks.
Thanks. I think it's just a broader reflection on knowledge tables. And I guess the concern that it will drive behaviours that really focus organisations to look at their own performance at the expense of system work and collaboration, which we know from a national perspective is where we're looking to change our care levels. So it's just really, I think, just being mindful of that dynamic, I think. Yes.
I think it's a really good point. We particularly in our situation of the Stronger Together on the last work, we're constantly in the situation of we want you to collaborate and work together for the benefit of patients, and we quite like to take you into separate rooms and performance management slices of what we're asking you to do. So we've got a meeting with NHS England tomorrow to try and just figure out exactly how NHS can get their statutory assurance of statutory organisations, but at the same time we don't lose this ability to improve and collaborate, because that's the big risk. I think you're absolutely right. So I think we've got a plan hopefully to try and resolve that, depending on how that aligns with the requirements NHS have got around oversight.
Okay, so they are papers are here, the month 3 and the month 4. Are there any issues any board member wishes to highlight out at the ARC meeting that we have so far, David?
Thank you, Chair. I was going to celebrate the no criteria to reside numbers that are in here, and how they've come down in August. Disappointed to hear that bounced up again. But even in the lower numbers in August, that still represents over 12 wards that we're staffing, heating, cleaning, maintaining. Just wondered, you both mentioned that the new discharge arrangements are coming into effect in September. I wondered if we've got any feel for a trajectory, how we expect that to bring about improvements in the coming months. Thank you.
Yeah, so we've mapped a trajectory of not meeting criteria size, and it's aligned to the CIP plan. So for the Royal, there is a plan that we would further de-escalate a ward, and we are planning to close a full ward on Broad Green, and Aintree have got another ward in their plan. So that is all linked to the fact that we are bringing the transfer care hub online and then expect to see. So we've got that mapped by month, and we'll be able to see how we've delivered on that next month.
I think it's important to note as well, because we'll get into this on the finance numbers. One of the things that we've asked through the PwC performance meetings that we've had is for PwC to almost act as the honest broker in terms of looking at urgent care, because we're not commissioned to deliver the number of beds we've got, clearly. Our improvement plans are multi-organisational system plans to reduce productivity reside. So what we've asked them to do is to look at, after all this hard work to get those numbers down, inevitably we'll then have winter pressures which are not funded, and therefore we expected suddenly to open all that capacity back up and maintain the financial position. So we're trying to get to PwC acting as that honest broker on us presenting a plan of what we could do in winter to reopen beds that we would close, potentially say Broad Green or others. But that comes at a commission cost. So for that to happen ahead of time, you need to guarantee that that's what you'll be able to do to support the winter plan. So I think that's really important because, as you see, it started to creep up again in September. I think the transfer of care hub will have a positive impact. We'll maintain that level or reduce it, and then as soon as we get into November, the usual issue of 4 months of sustained pressure as our problem financially will be a real problem for us on the pavement. So that works ongoing.
Yeah, it's right. I completely agree with all of that. It's just my 2 years of being here now, in winter tends to start in October in the interim. That's when we start to see the pressure. So we do know there's a window of opportunity here to do the work that David's mentioning, and we're working heavily with our system partners to try to achieve it. But I think it could be only till December change.
Other points, questions, concerns? Sue, please.
Yeah, just with regard to winter planning, will the board be receiving a report on that? At which meeting will we receive that?
Yeah, there'll be a full report coming, so we're just working through that now, then coordinating that across sites, and then there'll be a board, and there is a board assurance template and framework that we have to take responsibility to them, that we're assured by the winter plan. So we're just working through that, and it will be coming to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on. Finance report.
Chair, reports there spelled out throughout some key issues. As noted, it remains a really challenging financial position across NHS, but particularly in the Northwest and Cheshire and Merseyside. As at month 4, the Cheshire and Mersey plan was set at 178 million deficit, offset by deficit support funding was 2.7 million away from plan, excluding deficit support, reporting a deficit of 78.4 million. Due to the uncertainty or lack of assurance on delivery of that system plan, deficit support funding was withheld by NHSE to the system for the entirety of Q2 and possibly into Q3. That's a direct impact on the group. So as at month 4, UHLG has recorded a deficit of 25.8 million, which is 5 million away from plan. However, this entirely is due to the withholding of the deficit support funding. So as at Luft, we have a deficit of £18.5 million, which is 3.7 away from plan. For Liverpool Women's, 7.3 million, which is 1.3 million away from plan. Again, that's 100% the withheld deficit support funding for the month. That will continue during Q2, so and equates to an impact of 11.1 million in Luft and 3.9 million in Liverpool Women's. Deficit support funding can be reclaimed once NHSE receive assurance from the system that they'll deliver the plan, but at this point in time, we're not certain when that will occur. In terms of month 4, it's also worth noting that strike costs have been assessed at 1.3 million for Love and 0.1 million for the Women's. So as of month 4, whilst both organisations are on track, excluding deficit support funding, the financial position remains really tight, in particular, as we've talked about, our CIP delivery. So significant CIP has been achieved year to date. Love, £34.2 million, and that equates to an in-year effect of 61.3 million, which is 52% of the target. The Liverpool Women's 3.2 million year to date, which equates with an in-year effect of 7.6, which is 59% of the target. One of the asks that we've got is to fully develop plans. I'll come on to that in a second. Due to the risk status across the system, NHS commissioned PwC to perform financial performance reviews with every organisation across Cheshire and Mersey, and these took place in August. They were chaired by Stephen Hay and HSE and the ICB. These were constructive meetings, and actions were identified for all organisations, and they are ongoing and being resolved by Love and Liverpool Women's, as we've discussed at ARC. Two of the key items, two actions that came out of that were: one, fully developing the CIP plans to target by mid-September. And to take you from Chair in terms of how we progressed, as at the time of the meeting, the plans were developed at around about 55% level across the group. That's moved on and work's still ongoing. As at today, we're around about 75% at Love and 93% at Liverpool Women's. Work continues on that daily and this week, and next week we have a deep dive NHS review at Simon Worthington at Love to go through the CIP plans that all executives are involved with. The second main item coming out of the PwC review was for Love to identify support required to help delivery of the plan. And there were three main, and we've done that, and there's three main areas in the financial arena that we've asked for support on. Firstly, an independent view on the underlying drivers of the deficit, including the new hospital impact. As we know, the funding has been withheld this year and last. Secondly, in-year targeted support across a number of areas to deliver the in-year plan for Love. The main areas we're focused on is delivery of pay efficiencies, acceleration of commercial opportunities and productivity. And as James has mentioned, this brokerage on fair treatment for the winter plan and impact on Love in particular. Meetings are ongoing around the scope for this work. Finally, just to mention the cash position. As at month 4, there was £38.5 million in the bank, 5 million at Liverpool Women's. That equates to 10 working days and 11 at Liverpool Women's. That includes no capital cash. With the withholding of deficit support funding, it doesn't put us in a precarious cash position, and we've had to apply in September, Liverpool Women's for cash support. Pleased to say that was approved with £3.8 million, and we are applying in October for both organisations to NHS for cash support, assuming that DSF does not get approved in Q2 or Q3. So, in summary, it remains a really significant risk, and we're conscious of that, but much work going on to deliver the plan, and with hopefully the support from external parties will accelerate and by further assurance going forward.
Yeah, we operate in we discussed previously, we're operating in a system covering Cheshire and Mersey, which is both overfunded and beyond that overspending. And the aim of all these interventions and all the meetings that we have with PwC and all the circles that you go around in terms of we're up because you're not giving us the deficit funding, and then we're not giving you deficit funding because we're not managing the pay budget, and all that. Just go round and round. Bottom line is that we're in a system which can't afford the costs that are incurred by all its component parts on a day-by-day basis. And one of the problems for us, which Rob alludes to, is that the focus of the NHS England focus and the external scrutiny is all about getting that aggregate number back to where it needs to be at Cheshire and Mersey level. It's important to do that, but within that, in my experience in these meetings, is you're not picking up the nuances of some of the issues of our financial recovery that require more bespoke attention than just simply does our bottom line add up to the number it needs to for Cheshire and Mersey purposes. The ongoing lack of certainty around the funding of the Royal, which refers to the new hospital funding, is highly frustrating and lacks the others in the system are not taking their responsibilities seriously enough, in my view, to help get all that resolved. But when we go into these meetings, our arguments are undermined by our continual overspending of pay and not pay. We set a budget before the ink on the budget's dry, we're already overspending. And that is something that we talked about a lot in last week's meeting, and we need to continue to focus on, because we're not cut a fair deal in many ways from funders through the system. We have to try and find a better way of helping ourselves on some of that. Points, questions on this finance report? Jackie.
So really good news since ARC about how we've gone forward on our expanding our expenditure and where we're going to with our savings. Can I be assured that hitting this 5% at London, 93% at Liverpool means that the quality impact assessments have been done in a timely way and not affecting the quality of care?
Yeah, thanks, Jackie. So these are the development of the plans. So this is plans that have PIDs, are supported and have been through QAA, EIA assessment. So to get to agreed status, which is a fully developed plan, it has to have gone through that gateway.
Right, next please.
Thank you. Just on the paying the people thing, I think it's probably worth putting on record at board level. I thought the conversation art was really helpful, and the identification of the 255 people, 34 million outstanding challenge, I think, gave clarity through the complexity from a board point of view. And so I think the ongoing focus on the improvement of that number, I think, is really, really important.
I don't know if there's other questions on this point. I just wanted to explain the new risk rating that's being applied through the finances, just for the board to be aware of. But I don't know if there are other questions specific on.
I'm sorry, this hand-eye mouth coordination becoming an increasing challenge. We'll Peter first.
Yeah, sorry, it's just to pick up Jackie's point. It's good one on the QIA. The entry position on that blue-green is 90%. They've all been through blue-green And they've also all been through QIAs and EIAs. Jackie, what's left is more income recovery, I think. So it's less worrisome about QIA. Yeah, they still need to go through it, but the stuff that is there already has been through that.
Thank you.
Thank you. So again, sort of hot off the press, but it's important for the board to understand and be aware of, and we'll share the letters that are coming out. But a bit like the league table situation, the PwC review of organisations across Cheshire Mersey has also been put into a sort of categorised risk, low, medium, high, sort of Rob was referring to. Now, we got last night the letters that confirmed how that's been calculated. So Luft has been placed into the high risk category and the women's into the medium risk category. Now that sort of calculation is built up from 6 domains. So the first one is the materiality of the CIP in relation to the whole of the patch. So Luft is always going to be in the high risk category on that because it's 20% of the total. Until such a point as the CIP reduces. The programme maturity, so how much of your CIP programme is now blue-green, which we've touched on. So moving through that to get to a much higher number takes you from high risk to medium and then to level, so that's influenceable, and we're on to that. Track record of delivery is, did you deliver your financial plan in the previous year? Which is an interesting one because obviously there were movements and things in previous years where that could affect, but at the moment that's it's high risk. The fourth one is the planned deficit contribution. So again, if you deliver your surplus or your deficit in the year, how much is that of the total ICB position? So again, Luft features as high for that reason. Forecast risk to the plan, which we talked about, and there was a big discussion about in ARC around, as we might have said, that 35, 37 million sort of figure around the risk. And then the FPRM risk rating as well. So what we can at least see now is how we're being looked at, which things we can influence, which things are going to be locked. So clearly, the CIP contribution of Luft to Cheshire Merseyside is going to be a multiple year thing to get down to a number where it will be a significantly smaller percentage. But getting all the CIPs fully on track and influencing red to green to blue is much more influenceable. So same categories for the women's. Obviously, the materiality and size of the ask of the women's puts it in a low risk category, which helps. But the planned deficit contribution, ensuring the CIP is still remain. How that's going to be managed, because obviously we've also got part of the chest, but that's not the domain of this meeting yet, is despite Luft being in high risk and the women's in medium and heart and chest in whichever category that's in, they're still going to meet with the all three of us together to make it easier for us to sort of do the transaction of the business. So we'll send those letters out, but I thought it was useful for the board to be aware of that today. Very much there is an expectation that boards are on top of those 6 domains and what we're doing about them. So I think as we come back through future meetings, now we've got clarity on how this is being looked at, we'll make sure that in Rob's reporting, we're referencing how that sort of impacts each of the 6 domains that we're being held to account on, which I think will help us. So sorry to sort of describe that without the admin in front of you if it came from last night. So we'll give a further detailed report of it after that.
Very helpful. Tom, next, please.
Thank you, David. So obviously our deficit's a major problem, but we've always been ahead of the income plan. And I worry about this because our deficit would be even worse if we weren't. And I understand that's not guaranteed for the future. And it depends, for instance, on other organisations within the geographical region underperforming against their plan for income to create a service that the ICD can then give to us in commissioning. So I want to question what we know about the risk of that income going down, both regionally, but also in terms of our performance. And if that income decreases, does that mean that our waiting list will get much worse? What is the clinical impact of that?
Thanks, Tom. So we are ahead of plan. There are a number of reasons for that, including pass-through costs. So there's around about £5.5 million worth of pass-through costs for drugs, that high-cost drugs that are commissioned from us, but they're simply paid by the ICB, and that's the significant influence. There's around about £3 million worth of activity relating at this point in time. And that does remain a risk because the commissioners do have the ability to look at our activity and putting activity management plans to try and get it. We have constructive conversations with the commissioners, and we are performing to deliver constitutional standards that in our view, across Cheshire and Mersey as a whole, actually, the performance of income is on plan, in fact slightly below. So we are not, it does not rely on, we're not taking it from other organisations. At the moment, it's in balance, and that's a conversation we are having with the commissioners. In fact, we've got them last night only to try and get real clarity, because we believe that we're operating at a level to deliver activity required, and there are further opportunities where repatriation could be possible if we're allowed to do that as well, to use our capacity to its fullest. And I think that's right for the NHS, but obviously we need agreement from the commissioners. So you're right to flag it as a risk, and we're aware of it, but we're having this ongoing conversation.
So please.
Thank you. Thank you. Rob, you commented on the cash position for August, September. What do you see trajectory being over the coming months? Do you feel the pressure?
So that's built into our application. So the application for Love is for £21 million, and again that's assuming that we don't get deficit support funding for Q2 or into Q3. For Liverpool Women's, we're unsure that we were going to receive the money we requested in August, but we did. The original view was that we weren't, so we got the 3.8 million, which meant our next submission in October would be reduced from over 5 million down to 2.5, which is what we put in. So for Liverpool Women's, we always said that we would require around about £15 million to get us to the end of the year, including the fluctuations around winter. For Love, we had an assumption that if we receive deficit support funding and hit our plan, so two big variables there, but then we wouldn't require it till the end of the year and into next year. Obviously now that the variables have changed, so our view at the moment is the application we've made should see us through to the end of the year, assuming that deficit support funding isn't held in Q2 and Q3, but we do re-earn it and it get repaid into Q4, and then we should be fine.
Going to put your mic.
Right. It's around capital. Just wanted some assurance around it in view of all the pressures that we currently have with cash, etc. That our capital plans are in progress and on track. Whether you still see any sort of challenges around there in the coming months.
So the capital plans are in progress, but they are behind plan in the sense of we're not spending to the level that we'd originally assumed. Part of that is just the timing of getting contracts signed, etc. But there's no doubt that we have been advised that as part of our cash management strategy, that we do have to look at our capital programme, and if we need to slow it down, then that's a legitimate route to take. Now, obviously, if we were going to do that, we'd risk assess it and look at the impact on the programme. At the moment, we're naturally behind plan. That is helping cash. But Mike Burns, our new capital overseer across the group, is putting together a programme that looks at that prioritisation.
And Daniel, please.
Rob, can I just ask, when you reference the Simon Worthington review, from a governance point of view, how the board members see the output of that review?
So what we did previously, because this is the second deep dive review Simon will have conducted. time writes a report at the end of it, and we will include that within the
Thank you. Okay, I'm troubled by strike costs, Rob. For two reasons. One, because we sort of have a tone of, well, we're overspent by X bit with strike costs and that's someone else's problem, we can do it. 1.3 million is a lot of money. Can you give me a breakdown of the 1.3 million? And also, how others can join in, how collectively we seek to minimise the additional cost through strike rather than think we just have to spend what we have to spend and someone else's problem.
Yeah, thanks, David. So in terms of the breakdown, I'll go to the sides because obviously it's split across predominantly Aintree and the Royal. But just to know that the overall industrial action costs across Cheshire and Merseyside was assessed at £5.6 million. We weren't funded for that originally, so it has been identified at each organisation across the system. Those costs exclude income impact because obviously with managing the strike, we weren't able to conduct the activity as well. That would be another £1.1 million at look. In terms of the splits across the site, I'll perhaps ask Ethan and Matt to just comment. That's okay.
Yeah, the industrial action cost for Aintree was 600,000.
Well,
600,000.
sorry, before we move on, so what do you spend that on?
It was all covering shifts for doctors and David. So I mean, we really tried to protect the inpatient work so that cancers, urgent patients who need surgery will undertake, and we had to obviously protect the non-elective side of the organisation as well and make sure patients were safe. Where we lost some activity was more like patients, if I'm honest, and that was the big loss of activity. But really, the focus was on the non-elective side and also on protecting the patient work.
It was exactly the same, and it's managed across as a group. So we work with the same principles, the same rate cards, etc., across the sites. But just covering the baseline wards, critical care units to keep the cancer work in particular, and your emergency department going is significant. The main thing is just is the medical costs for the gaps in the rotas. Where we couldn't cover medical, we had additional pharmacists, etc., on weekends to try and cover it, but we still went into strike with lower than usual cover. We were assessed, our medical director assessed it, we were clinically safe, but we didn't flood the hospital with more doctors than we usually have. For example, we managed as well as we could, but we did have to pay additional hours.
Okay, but Rob, when you say that the Cheshire Merseyside is 5 point, it's assessed at 5 point something million, who assesses it?
Well, so this is the submission. We're asked by the Centre, the ICB, to submit what the impact was, what the costs were. So that's the consolidated by organisation. So it's been highlighted to the region. You are correct. There is no at this point no notice that there'll be an extra funding for that. However, it is a genuine impact to.
Okay, I don't want to harp this point too long. I've probably already gone too far, but my concern is that we treat this as a bidding process, i.e. we think someone will give us the money, so we're not manage the expenditure as tightly as we otherwise could. And I just think we need to try and find a way, probably through the ARC, being assured that we're managing the additional cost that we incur as well.
If it gives any reassurance, Chair, we'd estimated a position of £1.5 million, so we didn't come in below that.
Yeah, if you'd estimated 2.6, you'd say we're at 50%.
Yeah.
But in the words of our corporate governance colleagues, I take it best moderate assurance.
Thank you, Chair.
Let's move on, please. We've got 3 sets of annual reports that David's going to take us through before we head into our meeting.
Thank you very much, Chair. If I may, I'll do a summary of the reports for both organisations for each section, and then take a pause for questions, if that's okay. So I'll start off with the infection prevention and control annual reports for both LUP and Liverpool Women's. Excuse me. And really just to start off by saying that both reports are written with the ability to provide assurance to board on the obligations set out in the Health and Social Care Act 2008 of the Code of Practice, and that enables us to be able to demonstrate how we are able to give our information in an open, transparent manner. So for Luft, again, there is nothing within this report that hasn't already been through from a performance point of view through our assurance committees and through the trust board throughout the year. However, it is important to note that Luft didn't meet its identified targets and thresholds against some of the infections that are healthcare required and associated. And those particularly are around C. diff, difficile, MRSA bacterias, and the gram-negative infections. And those particular issues we've identified that there is a mixture of lapses in IPC practice, and we understand where they are. That's particularly around IV access and within catheter care and the management of patients with catheters. And also there's a lack of consistency in some of the housekeeping of documents and the noting of when infections happened. And that's important, not just because the infections are obviously important to patients wherever they get their infection, but it's important that there's true learning around where those infections are acquired, so that organisations can work together to have a better system to prevent harm. The reports, excuse me, the annual report for Luft identifies an improvement plan within the document that cover for the next 12 months, and the focus will be on that improvements in IPC practice, again, particularly in the management of IV access and catheter care. And a plan is being drawn up currently with not just IPC teams and frontline clinical staff on wards, but from those specialist services and how they're going to contribute to that leadership at local level to ensure there's greater accountability, and also to change some of our practices within particular catheter care so that we don't have patients who have catheters here for far too long, the decisions aren't taken in a timely way, and that we know contributes to patients having an infection. The assurance process within IPC starts at site level, so within clinical teams and then at a whole site for their site infection prevention control groups, and then through to corporates, an oversight for the organisation through the quality standards group, and then obviously a 6-monthly report through to our water board, and then ultimately the annual report that lands here every year. Liverpool Women's Hospital, again, follow the same methodology around getting assurance for the Health and Social Care Act, Code of Practice. And evidently the numbers within that report are significantly smaller than within Luft, but equally impactful on the patients when they do have an infection. And again, there's been a non-achievement of the healthcare associated infections within that organisation as well. And rationale and the reasons that the learning from those infections are similar. Some of that is around lapses in IPC. The work plan within the Liverpool Women's report really focuses on 4 main issues around training and making sure that people's practice is concordant with best practice, that the audit process identifies issues that will inform changes to that practice, and also to understand where best practice is evident and that can be shared. How we have a clarity of reporting across the organisation so that we know where the successes and areas for development are, and how we share that improvement journey. And the 2 organisations, Liverpool Women's and Luft, are obviously now working together. So some of those learning opportunities are shared. I'll take a pause here, Chair, for any questions on the IPC annual reports.
Thank you. Tom, first.
So I wondered about whether there were differences between our main sites for Luft. And one of the justifications for the new hospital was that single rooms would actually reduce rates of infection. But then what you said around the risks that are created through catheter care and IV access, that's not going to differ too much between the sites. So is there a broad difference? Are we seeing any of the benefits that were hoped for from single beds, or is the nature of these infections such that we can't expect to see these benefits?
So I think it's fair to say, because we've been in the new hospital for a couple of years now, 2 years next month, I think, that what we are seeing is the issue around human factors and colleagues' behaviour in how they manage IPC issues. They take, there is my words, they take assurance that a patient is in a side room, that there is a greater protection for the patient, and so they're not conducting IPC practice as they should do. So we look at things like cross-contamination, or people not adhering to PPE, protective equipment guidance as perhaps as thoroughly as they should do on both sites, but that is very clear within areas where there are side rooms. And the main issue around catheter care is around our processes aren't as tight and being monitored and practiced as they should do. So catheters are left in for far too long. That there isn't a process of a default of catheters being removed from patients at an earlier stage, and then it is an exception that they stay in for longer, and those processes. So back to your question, side rooms can and should help. Human factors aren't allowing that benefit to be realised.
It was just on, it was just on.
Bit late now, sorry.
It was just on that point, Tom, that it was raised, escalated through our quality and safety committee only this month into HMB, because in our CQC review, it was highlighted around behavioural and cultural issues at the Royal. There was noted, wasn't there, that there was IPC concerns from people wearing watches, not there below the elbow, etc. I think we're picking up there is a cultural issue at the Royal, and we are planning, there is going to be a big site-wide commons campaign starting next week, and we're going to be doing senior check and challenge walk round led by the hospital leadership team, because exactly as David says, it feels like we should be seeing more positive results from Silverwing Hospital, and our individual behaviours are not supporting us. So it's going to be a priority now for the hospital leadership team, and you'll see that is a 12 rated risk on our risk register at the minute because of those concerns.
Thank you, Chair. Just to give the entry perspective of that, it's almost, excuse me, the flip side. So we have less side rooms, so therefore when we get a patient who's unfortunate enough to develop a healthcare associated infection, we have to get them isolated quickly. So our action plans have to be really on point on ensuring that patients, when they develop an infection, we get them isolated as quickly as possible. And that's, like Nala said, that's why I've raised my risk on list to 12, which I've reported to ARC, because that's the action plan we're working at from an entry perspective, which is really key. Urgent isolation and utilisation of the site rooms we've got.
Thank you. So really good reports, and thanks for the transparency around the issues. One thing that I'm not seeing in the report, not so much for the Royal but more for Aintree, is around bed occupancy as we're taking down bed numbers. Our occupancy is going to be rising, therefore, you know, be more at risk of getting those transmissions if the practice is not as good as it should be. So, can you give me an idea about bed occupancy? Thank you.
To my honourable colleagues across the table.
Shall I come in as it's an entry perspective question? Thank you, Jackie. A really good point, and sort of tunes into what I've just said, really, in terms of as our bed occupancy increases, then it's the isolation and the urgent sampling and isolation of patients who develop symptoms and infections. That's what we're focusing on, and that's the action plan I want to see back at HMB to make sure we're tightening the controls on that issue, and that's why we've raised the list.
Thank you. Other points? Annual report. I mean, it's sometimes with annual reports, it can give the impression it's the first time we've considered these issues and the summary of the report. So I think it gives us an added focus and impetus for, you know, we've been talking about the seeded issues and other things this year throughout. But it is quite stark of the trends when you look at them formalised in this report.
Indeed, and it ties into so many issues, particularly about antimicrobial stewardship and how we use antibiotics. We know there is a piece of work. I think that was reported at the last trust board around the work that's now in training.
Yeah.
Yeah, not answering now, but we need to consider. You touched on it before, Chair, where we get benchmarking opportunities and we look at them and say, well, actually, our rate per 1,000 or whatever isn't materially different than we've been mentioned before. We've had that conversation. I still feel uncomfortable that we've not got good benchmarking, and that's not because it's there and we're not choosing to find it. But it's still not at the sort of national level or level of benchmarking that we would like. And I do wonder whether we need to just reconsider, well, if it's not there, how do we do it then? Because it's almost the absence of knowing whether we're in the same situation as every other hospital, deteriorate or not. It is forcing us really. And I wouldn't be keen to do that in Cheshire Nursing for the reasons that we said earlier. We might get the false assurance that, you know, we're okay in Cheshire Nursing. Where's that against the rest? So maybe not for now, but perhaps a development session when we talk about the future performance reporting. I do think we need to think about how are we going to get better benchmarking on this information, because we're constantly looking at our own position, not able to possibly like to where we sit.
I think, James, where we've mentioned before, in other organisations, where there is a metric around performance and then against best in class and then worst in class, and where we would sit there. So it isn't just around our geographical location, it's around organisations nationally and indeed worldwide.
Thank you. Okay, excellent reports received. Dr. David, move on, please.
Thank you very much.
Safeguarding.
I shall now take us to the two safeguarding reports for the organisations. I'll start with LUT.
Michael, please, David.
Thank you. So this is the LUT safeguarding annual report. So the report demonstrates the compliance against the ability to provide a safe service across the organisation, both for regulatory and statutory responsibilities. The report does identify the significant impact and pressure that the service is under, and that there is a concern around how that will be managed in the future if the pressure continues. However, I think, the report identifies that the opportunities that will be collaborative work across GLASP will give us an opportunity to look at safeguarding services across the whole Liverpool to be able to ensure there's increased mutual aid and joint working, so that the services are less fragile in some parts of the city. The self-assessment against the safety standards demonstrate that there is compliance against some of the standards, and there are development needs across those other action plans, and they are detailed within the report. 15 of those are compliant and 48 are partially compliant or fully compliant, and that is similar to other organisations as well. So I don't want us to feel as though there's a significant risk there. That is a set of safety standards that are being managed across the whole of the country. The issue that we pick up every year is around training and training levels, and we have compliance or achieved compliance in levels 1 and 2 for safeguarding training. We've achieved that by 93% against targets of 90%. And whilst there has been an improvement to 80% compliance for level 3, that still falls short of the 90% target. And focused work is taking place around particular staff groups and particular clinical areas, so that we can ensure that that level of compliance is improved. The issues that the report calls out is that there's a further need to embed the learning for sustained improvement, and I think that that's one of the issues that comes through, that we as an organisation, is there is so much activity and learning. There needs to be a clear focus of what the development programmes are going to be and how that learning is going to be monitored for its sustained change. And that there is a requirement for us to continue to improve the transition framework for young people moving into adult services. And again, this is an issue that's writ large across the whole of Liverpool, and we would hope, we would anticipate that the work across LASP would support this in a stronger way. From the Liverpool Women's Safeguarding Report, it does demonstrate the regulatory and statutory compliance against the standards. Again, training compliance with level 1 and 2 training has been achieved, and again, there is a challenge within the women's around compliance at level 3, and within the definition of ability training standards as well. It is recognised that there is an improvement in those areas, but like Luft, it's a real challenge to achieve that standard trajectory. The report details significant numbers of referrals and the acuity of those referrals coming into the Women's Hospital, and that has an impact on the workload within that service. Sadly, that is reflective of the local demographic and the complexity of the local demographic of the people that are using that service, but it is important that those concerns are raised. It is also a sign that more people within the organisation are utilising the ability to make those concerns known, so that women and children have a safe experience both within their care journey and in their wider life that is possible. Priorities for the next year include obviously an increase in compliance against training, and to embed supervision across the whole family service, so that practitioners in those areas feel supported in the work that they do and are able to provide a greater level of service for the safeguarding of people. And of course, that will also include increased awareness of the Mental Capacity Act. Let's take any questions on the issues raised.
Thank you, David. First of all, it's a comment, and then there's a question, if you don't mind. So firstly, the comment is, I think there's many examples in the reports where we've demonstrated our role as an anchor organisation and particularly in the staff story, I found incredibly moving. It wasn't just the staff member, it was also the family and the role, and an important role that we play. The second one is when I looked at the risks for the women's and for Luft, there are differences and there are similarities. And the question is, are we learning from each other where the other one doesn't have the risks? And how are we bringing the similar risks together as one organisation or one group?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Beth. So the work that we are doing across corporate services across Liverpool, safeguarding services for all the Black organisations are part of that. And so we are looking at all the experience, the resource and the knowledge across our city and how that can be best allocated and utilised for the whole of the population rather than sitting just within a one site. Evidently, each site has a nuance and a particular catchment of patients that require some different degree of support, supervision and safety. But that knowledge and experience, and particularly where people have had successes in managing some of that safety, there's going to be a greater opportunity for sharing that across the organisation, and also sharing some of those personnel who have got a greater experience. So, for instance, we know that at the Royal Liverpool Hospital, we do have, and at Aintree, we have women coming to our emergency department who are pregnant, and they're coming for non-pregnancy related issues. We don't have a safeguarding midwife within our service. What we have now within the group, we have the ability to be able to have access to the safeguarding midwife. This future work with LASP will give us all the opportunity to benefit from that, and that the boundaries between the organisations will be less so.
Mike, next please, then.
Thank you. Thanks, David. I think this is a really good example of why the reports are so helpful, because you see a rounded picture of somebody who's been marching through the year. I thought they were both quite arresting reports, and to do it in reverse order, I thought the women's was arresting around context. So it reads as a skill mixed multidisciplinary team, but section 42 inquiries have travelled, safeguarding children referrals, 50% increase, major increase in domestic abuse, and I get that that's a context, but that must feed into capacity concerns as well down the line. So I think there's some real context concerns there. I read the loved one with a more of a performance concern. I thought it was very honest, which I think is to its credit. But flagging insufficient leadership capacity, saying we maintained core activity, but there's not a lot of evidence of progress against strategic objectives, that kind of restatement of strategic objectives. And a really arresting statistic around 2,800 applications for dolls and 12. That, and in terms of all the violence and aggression stuff that staff and patients are dealing with, I think that was a really, really stark thing that warrants further scrutiny. So I think context in one, performance in other.
Indeed. Thank you for that. And I think again within context, those the deprivation of liberties issue requires us to have that relationship with local authority who are authorising authority for that. And I think it demonstrates that whole pressure across the whole of the system. And whilst the work that we're doing around reorganising and perhaps reshaping some of our safeguarding services will help to some degree, it can't move away from the fact that Liverpool is a city that has higher health and social deprivation impact on our population, and that has an impact on the safety and security of people who live here.
Please.
Just following on from Mike's comments, I was just going to pick up at the issue in the Liverpool Women's report. I'm struck by the large percentage increase in female genital mutilation cases that have happened over the last 3 years. There is an incredibly large increase. And obviously, whilst the report recognises the reporting requirements, statutory reporting requirements, I'm trying to work out, is there any other role for us as an organisation to do in terms of supporting other local organisations on the publicity side and the communications as an organisation? The percentage increases was quite shocking, given that we know there's been a lot of media coverage over this issue over the last few years, but the number of cases continues to rise on a sort of 20% numbers on a yearly basis.
Thank you. And again, I think we acknowledge that there has been that increase in numbers of women who have been impacted on that. I know that, and I'll ask Jenny to come in a second, but I know that the Liverpool Women's Hospital have got a continued engagement with local community organisations and faith groups to support people, particularly young women, who are in those situations where they may become victims of female genital mutilation, and how they can provide support and a safe environment for those women and young people to speak out. It is incredibly difficult because of some of the closed nature of some of our communities, but there are the opportunities for us to do further work. Jenny, I don't know if you've got any further comments.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We have really awareness of this over the last few years, encouraged people to talk, made our midwives and staff more au fait with the whole situation. I think it was something that in previous years wasn't really spoken about. So I think we've seen that real increase, and you're absolutely right. The more that we can spread that out across organisations, the more we should be doing. So it's really good.
And we know that there is the continued liaison with education services who are obviously one of the areas placed to identify young women who are at risk.
Thank you. So we're asked David.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report, though. It's really very clear. You mentioned in several places in the report, improvement plans are in place. I just wonder, has the board have been cited on the actions that have been taken with those improvement plans? We don't have to wait for next year's report to have an update.
So colleagues will recall that we have a 6-monthly report through the assurance process up to board. So we'll have a position throughout the year. So it won't be this time next year, David. Thank you.
James, please.
Yeah, I've got the consciousness sections over. So I'm conscious we're overrunning on this section, so I don't want to necessarily have the answer now, but I think as a minute or an action to bring back to the board, that there's clearly a difference in how the safeguarding reporting works with women's and LOT. And one goes through a quality standards committee, which has both parties in, and then the other doesn't, and it goes to the hospital management board. I know that's being looked at. I just think it's useful because the two side by side show that the governance doesn't quite connect. So I know that's under review, but if we could bring that back as an action, just to give the board assurance that that's been resolved, I think that would be helpful rather than wait for next year.
So I'll bring that back.
Thank you. Important discussion on a very important subject for us. I am now going to change the agenda around slightly because of the time, so we'll now take a 10-minute, correct? Before we resume with the volunteer services anyway. But
1,000 hours of time that volunteers have given to Luft over the last year. And the key focus we've tried to maintain is the continued recruitment of volunteers into that service, given the number that reduced over the pandemic, and we've been trying to capture that. That has been a somewhat of a challenge. Some of the mechanisms that we have around some of the vacancy control, I'll say that out loud, around some of the admin support within that service. However, that aside, we now have a much more representative volunteer body that is representative of our local community. There's a greater presence across all our sites, our love sites, and the variety of roles within the voluntary services range from the very traditional roles such as wayfinders and greeters, chaplaincy and ward volunteers, to people who've got a lived experience and share that within their voluntary service, and a newer development of end-of-life volunteers. We know there's a lot more for us to be able to do for the carer services across each site, and this is why we are now looking at how are we going to provide greater impact and involvement with site leadership, so we can understand what services are required from a voluntary capacity to be able to support the work that's happening there. Before I conclude on the Luft report, I must mention the Sunshine Support Group, which is the support for breast cancer patients and breast cancer survivors. They were awarded the King's Award of Voluntary Services, which has been equivalent to an MBE earlier this year. We have got some amazing people within our voluntary services, and they really do enhance the services of our whole organisation. The report from Liverpool Women's Hospital is equally uplifting. There are, sorry, get my words out. We have amazing people providing the services in the voluntary services at the Liverpool Women's, and have contributed over 60,000 hours of support in the past year. And again, it is a service that is fundamentally rooted in its local community, not only with the volunteers that participate, but within the activities it also supports. It is really a volunteer community that celebrates its diversity. The service is able to open its doors and welcome people to the organisation, and be able to speak to people in 30 different languages. And that goes a long way to support people who are accessing the services of the Liverpool Women's, with recognising people who are like that and are able to communicate and support them to help navigate their care journey. A focus on the future of Liverpool Women's is to develop new roles such as baby champions, baby companions, sorry, words mixed up, infant support volunteers, and support with greater recognition and involvement of the local deaf community. Happy to take any questions. Sorry, I stumbled over my words a few times then.
Thank you. Good report. I love the Liverpool Women's Hospital report. Fantastic. Great. Lots of good stuff going on across all parts of the. What questions, James, please?
One of the things I often observe at the Women's, and it's brought out really on the report, is the bilingual volunteers helping, and it really stands out as a sort of thing for our local communities, and it's less so brought out in the local report. So it was just, again, that's the question to be answered now, more of a, is that something we're going to try and look at more in the part of the group?
So I think, thank you. So I think that there is a very clear need for us to have a more of a standardised approach for how all of these reports should be presented, celebrating the uniqueness of each of the sites.
Sorry, though, it was less about the report, more are we going to look at that as an offering? If you
indeed, and I think within the Luft report, we've been able to see that the diversity of our volunteers has improved, but I don't think what we've done is we've really channeled those elements of, and so what does that look like to people who walk in, around being really noticeable about people being able to speak different languages and greet people in different ways, and it's more culturally appropriate.
Thank you, Chair. David, I thought they were great reports. Something I picked up though was around the downturn on recruitment. These volunteers provide a lot of support, not only to patients, but also to staff with the work that they do. So is there anything that we need to be considering to improve that recruitment situation?
I think, as I've mentioned, one of the challenges has been we have some vacancy within that service in the small number of admin assistants within that service. I think it's evident that parts of that pause in the recruitment process has had an impact on that service. We have continued to recruit, but it now takes longer to be safe recruitment practice. Once that pause is lifted, we will then see an uptick in the numbers of people who are volunteering. It's not that people don't want to volunteer in our hospitals.
Just one thing to consider, David, and we can take this up to here. Perhaps we need to be considering these roles as patient-facing because they do offer that. So maybe that's something we can talk about as an exec team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. But Mike, then, Sue.
Thank you. Chief, briefly, I think King's Award is just phenomenal. Somebody who's tried and failed several times. Well done. It's really, really good. Just the second point, just linking back to the patient story, which I think is a story of both deep personal sadness, but also the failure of civic society. She had nowhere to go, or felt she had nowhere to go. Volunteering is phenomenal well-being activity, and in terms of people's engagement with other people. And I think as we think through how we're going to do volunteer recruitment, I think that well-being, community engagement message needs to be front and centre.
Absolutely, I think that there's a whole message both for people who are in employment, even within families. There's a whole element around loneliness and the impact of loneliness on someone's own self-esteem. It is really, really impactful. And that ability to be able to be part of a community, whether it's a faith community, a local neighbourhood community, or a community of volunteers, is really important.
Super.
Really good papers, really good reports. So thank you for those. Just wondered, do we have a strategy for our volunteering services? Do we know where we want to be and what good really looks like for the two organisations?
So I know that each of the services has their own strategy. I think that what we will be moving into in the fullness of time within the next year is we will have a volunteer strategy for the group plus, so that we'll be able to do that. So we've got those nuances that's particular around the women's or the Walton Neuro Centre, but also that we've got an opportunity to be able to share those volunteers and their expertise across the group.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. It was just picking up on Beth's point. I agree about the recruitment challenges. I think it's back to James's point a bit earlier. I think at a time when we've got pressure on our services, the role of volunteers is incredibly important. But I think the impact in the recruitment team, I recognise the challenges within the volunteer service, but that recruitment team being able to process the volunteer applications. And I think it's a really good example of where having a strategy and approach and seeing the benefit is great, but operationally it's a real challenge to be able to deliver that, and it becomes a compounding effect on our ability to improve overall performance. I know similarly within charity we've got people who are interested, but because of that recruitment process we've not been able to get them involved, and the danger is that we lose them because they will go off elsewhere. So just mindful that there's broader decisions that we're taking, but this is where the kind of compounding effect of some of those vacancy control plays out and actually creates more of a challenge for us to be able to improve performance. So it's just an observation. Yeah.
There is opportunity, Chris and I know that we've had conversations about how the volunteer service could work into a huge benefit towards the charity and people who want to do volunteering within charity giving and charity events.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, David, for the report. Just one thing that struck me talking about recruitment of volunteers and so on, that the two volunteering groups I've had particular contact with in the last 12 months through my visiting as a NED have been the Sunshine Group and the Honeysuckle Group. And what's striking about those is people with lived experiences of the service are really able to have much more meaningful conversations with patients and staff. And I just think if that can be thought through when we're doing more recruiting, because there must be other services where we could get similar people on board. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, David.
Thanks, David. And so these reports reflect fantastic people doing fantastic work that we depend on. And it's absolutely there to be celebrated. Thank you. Right, move on to a suite of people issues now. Pip's going to walk us through. We start with residents on the desert.
And so as we know, there are three reports on the people affected as part of the agenda. And the first provides reassurance and overview and summary of the outcome of the Workforce Race Equality Standard WRES and the Workforce Disability Equality Standard WDES for both Liverpool University hospitals and also for Liverpool Women's Hospital. As we know, the WRES WDES metrics aim primarily to enable us to compare the workplace career experiences of colleagues and to understand and address the barriers they face from both a race and a disability perspective. The board is asked then to note that the paper is based on the data submissions made in May 2025, and we haven't formally received a validated pack back as yet. So therefore, some of the data may change just marginally before we publish on the 31st of October. So I'm going to just pull out some of the key elements from the paper and just take a moment to share some high-level insight from a national perspective that's starting to emerge. So initial analysis from across the NHS is indicating that there is an increase actually in the declaration of disability compared to last year, which is a really positive step. More employers are supporting reasonable adjustments from their previous year. There's an increase of like 75% supporting that. Disability staff are unfortunately twice as likely to be performance managed and experience high levels of harassment or bullying from colleagues and managers than their non-disabled colleagues. That's still a really big thing nationally. And the proportion of Black and minority ethnic staff in the workplace continues to rise, which is really positive. Finally, I think just another point to mention is that the BME board membership has actually reached the highest level since the WRES was established several years ago at 16% nationally. So that's just something for us to pay attention to. And just one final point, that although there are positive improvements made both nationally and for Liverpool Women's, for some positives in the reports, it is being noted that the current challenging working environments, financial challenges that we discussed today, and also I guess vacancy challenges that is negatively impacting colleagues' experiences, and we know that this will disproportionately affect colleagues who either have come from a BME background or those with disabilities, which is points to note. So within the paper, the board can see the initial analysis from both WRES and WRES, the indicators and the comparisons on last year and the previous data for both Liverpool and for Love. And what I'm just going to propose to do is just to pull out a couple of key findings for both Love and for Liverpool Women's related to the race equality standards. So from a most improved perspective for Love, we've seen an increase in 4% in the number of staff from the BME background, believing that the trust will provide equal opportunities for career progression and promotion. And they've also reported that there was no difference felt from the BME staff with experience to accessing mandatory training compared to their white colleagues. The areas for improvement, just to pull out the loft, although we have seen a slight improvement in the number of BME colleagues experience bullying, harassment or abuse of patients, it's still 24% approximately of colleagues who report an experience of this negative behaviour, which is really challenging for us. With 18% of colleagues reporting experiencing discrimination from their manager, albeit that's down 2% from last year, but it's still an eye-watering number. From a Liverpool Women's perspective, the most improved elements to pull out are the BME representation, and that's the percentage of staff at band 1 to 9, a noticeable 4% increase to 13%, and that's primarily in support roles, and a 5% increase in senior role representation, which is really positive. And also perceptions of equal opportunity relating to career progression for BME staff in the women's role increased to 6%. So it's not seen some positive improvements still. Areas to improve, a challenging area for I think both organisations is the black minority and ethnic staff are 2.2 times more likely to enter the disciplinary process, and that is a decline on last year. Although candidates are now shortlisted for interview through the guaranteed interview scheme that the Liverpool Women's have put in place. Unfortunately, 11 white colleagues are 11 times more likely to be appointed. So there's still some work to do around appointment, supporting colleagues, and building awareness of line managers to support them into roles. So if we take then the next part of the paper, which is in relation to the workforce disability quality standards, both trusts saw an increase in between 5 to 7% of disabled colleagues self-reporting their disability, which is really positive, so we can make meaningful changes because of the declarations and the increase in that. Both trusts did see a 4% decrease in the number of disabled colleagues experienced by harassment, although it's still 23% are reporting this experience. Both trusts saw an increase of disabled staff feeling confident to report bullying harassment, and a particularly positive increase for Liverpool Women's been increased 25% of their disabled colleagues feel safe to speak up about their experiences. And staff engagement scores, unfortunately, for colleagues who have a disability are noticeably lower than those who don't have one. It's the reflection currently. The board is asked to note that the data that is used to calculate the indicator does have a high number of unknown disability status recorded. And what that basically means is that colleagues either didn't answer the monitoring question or they've indicated that they prefer not to say. So what that does do is slightly skew some of the data for us and creates an element of challenge really for us to get true perspective on colleagues' reflections of their working experience from a disability background. So that's a summary of the data. So following the national team validating the data, which will happen, we expect over the next couple of weeks, both organisations will go into a period of review where we will review indicators, new and new trends, areas of strength and persistent disparity that we see to inform positive areas of action both at group level and at hospital level. So that's the commitment. Very much continue to work with our expert partners who are real, kind of real supporters to us, the Race Equality Hub, the Brain Charity, and inclusive companies, etc., to enable us to be able to kind of pull our plans together and gain real impact into the next year, and continue to work very, very closely with our networks as we move forward. And then we'll be firming up the positive areas of action 25-26, some of which are listed in the paper for recommendation, but we do just want to check the data to ensure that they're in the right area. So therefore, in summary, the board is asked to note the findings of the WS and WDAS reports and the provisional data that we included, note the actions in progress and the proposed areas of action, and support the publication of both data sets on our website by the 31st of October, which is a national expectation for us.
That's some very stark messages for us to receive in the data. Yeah. Fourth question. Okay.
Really good paper, really clear. I suppose I'm just reflecting on last year when we were talking about the great strides we believe we would make. And I don't think we've done that. In some cases, we've gone backwards. And I am concerned around the innate staff being more of this disciplinary action. And that's something I've asked the board a number of times to understand that. So could you talk a little bit more about that? Thank you. Of course, yeah. So there's some really good initiatives that have only recently been put in to support colleagues through kind of processes to support so there's kind of toolkits, advice, there's management guidance around those types of things. There are policies on the page now that have been implemented, and some guaranteed interview initiatives that are happening, and then inclusive interview audits that are being completed post to actually see the number of colleagues that have actually gone in through the process and then been shortlisted and successful. So there's a further impetus, I think, on it, primarily around that area. But lots more work to do, John.
Thank you. Super.
In terms of action plans arising from these reports and improving some of the indicators, what's the governance around that, and when will the board receive an update?
Yeah.
So from a governance perspective, there's 2 channels. It will go through hospital management boards have their own EDI objectives and action plans, of which the rest and there's details are captured within that specific action. So that goes through the hospital management board's assurance and then up through kind of our internal governance and mental boards. So until we get, so there are action plans in place that are shared within the pack that we can kind of demonstrate with that governance route. So the hospital management boards and the exec managing directors and the people elected to monitor the monitoring. Thank you.
James, so we're doing everything we can do, do you think, in terms of this?
No, it's a simple answer, because we are, still seeing the data that's in front of us. In some ways, this is almost the opposite of most of the things. We don't need to benchmark this, do we? Because whatever the benchmark, the numbers are not anywhere near where we want them to be. So one of the things I'm thinking about is we've spent a lot of time on this over the last few years, various culture and OD programs in the organisation. If you wanted to take a positive, there are improvements pretty much across the board, but they're small. At this rate, it would take us a long time, wouldn't it, to get to where we think would be anything near reasonable. I'm going to argue the opposite of what I always do, which is I always prefer to measure for improvement, but I do think having some much tighter standards around where we expect to get on this is probably where we need to be. What we're doing is we're sort of waiting to see the figures at the end of the year or part of the year and see where we improve, but we're not really setting our stall out as we should be in terms of what the acceptable progress should look like. And now we've been at this for about 2 years, we can see an improvement, as I say, of 1 or 2% of places. Factoring that forward, as I say, are we really going to say that this is an acceptable position to be in the next decade until we get there? I don't think we are. So I think probably what we need to do is have a look at putting some metrics in here that we actually would then hold ourselves to account to, rather than just sort of the usual thing of continuing to chip away, but then wait till the end of the year and see whether we're improving. So subject to the board's view on that, I think we need to get a bit more targeted in terms of what we expect here than we are now.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, any final? Okay, thank you. We'll follow that basis. Can you move on, please, to the health and wellbeing frame?
Thank you. So the health and wellbeing progress report is presented to the board. It's a biannual health and wellbeing progress report update, and aims to provide assurance to the board relating to the effectiveness of the ongoing health and wellbeing initiative and improve staff wellbeing. The report does summarise some of the plans and the work that's in progress to improve staff wellbeing through some of the targeted interventions, and they are guided by health diagnostics, staff experience insight from staff survey, workforce demographics and HR data. It's worth noting that as UHLG continues to expand and embed its group-wide model, we are looking at more of a coordinated matrix delivery plan and approach to ensure that it's a seamless experience for colleagues on the receiving end of it. So in readiness for the launch of the UHLG People Shared Service, we've been looking at roles, responsibilities, accountability as part of the proposed operating model, and have very clear distinctions around the role of occupational health in that, to lead on the clinical and preventative health programmes, and also from an organisation development, wellbeing and inclusion perspective to drive the cultural behaviour, inclusive wellbeing, staff support type elements. I just also would like to note I'd also like the board to note the positive appointment of Sarah Walker as the non-executive director champion, and it's a huge demonstration. The team have really welcomed this demonstration of the group's commitment to building a healthier, more inclusive organisation with some expert in their support and leadership. So thank you for that. So there's a few key focus areas that have happened since the previous biannual report. At a UHLG level, there's been quite an extensive collaborative review of the effectiveness, the accessibility of both Liverpool Women's and also Luft's health, wellbeing and staff support offers. Colleagues have given feedback that often they're unaware of what's available and how they access it. So there's been due at the end of this month, a new UHLG staff offer is due to launch. And that'll bring the best of both Liverpool Women's and and Luft to be able to kind of bring all of that together for colleagues to be able to access it. And we're also looking at just finalising an employee assistance programme, which will gain colleagues access to 24/7 support through a partner organisation, something other organisations have Luft doesn't allow Liverpool Women's to do. A health needs assessment was completed, and that has informed then some of the targeted interventions that have been completed within this space. So the data, the high level kind of health needs assessment data told us that 56.6% of staff were recording multiple issues, and 72% of those were linked to work. 54.8% reported symptoms of depression and anxiety, something that's increased due to the current environment that colleagues are working within related to stress. And also 33% of respondents were reporting significant financial stress with the financial environment they're operating within and some of the challenges that they're experiencing at work. So some of the targeted interventions that are being taken to respond to that are very targeted support and management of musculoskeletal, so MSK injuries and long-term conditions. The team have been working with line managers to improve reasonable adjustments and experience for colleagues who have from a disability or care backgrounds. And the staff psychology service, as I've mentioned, is due to expand to explore that digital employee offer. And really pleased to say that we've re-established the role of a wellbeing champion across all of the organisations. So colleagues will start to see them in kind of relevant spaces across their organisation as more of a peer support offer. And then looking forwards, the forward plans and the areas of action that are included within the paper aim really to kind of address the broader health and engagement strategy across UHLG, but we'll be very focused on the hospital people plans and the actual areas of focus for the colleagues that tell us that they need support with from health and need perspective. And we also want to maintain the sustainability of kind of embedding the wellbeing initiatives by aligning them to the people plans continuing as we move forward. So therefore, then the board is asked to note the progress made against the wellbeing offer that was outlined from the biannual report 6 months ago, and to receive assurance that the areas of focus for 2025 are evidence-led and will be aligned into hospital areas of focus for their colleagues, but also offer a group-wide approach to UHLG staff support.
Thank you. Good enough progress that's being made. Any points they want? Thanks. We can speak regarding the
Final one, thank you, Chair. Okay, so this is the final report. So this is the Freedom to Speak Up board report, and the update covers 3 biannual Freedom to Speak Up reports, one from Liverpool Women's, and then a group summary. It aims to enable the board to receive an appraisal of the similarities of both of the services that are provided currently, as we move into a new way of delivering freedom to speak up across both UHLG and also the NHS. So it's just important to note, and it's included within the paper, that there is a changing national landscape with reference to the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, with the recent review completed by Dr. Penny Dash in July 2025. So there was a recommendation, as you will be aware, that the Freedom to Speak Up functions should be decentralised, and that the National Guardian's Office will close by April 2026. That is creating a huge amount of kind of lack of clarity, as you would expect, whilst we wait for transitional plans and to understand what provider trust should be doing and what might be done centrally. But what it has done is give our Freedom to Speak Up leads a real opportunity actually to review the services, which is what's included within the paper, to review the data and feedback that we use and start to consider how we can have a more holistic, broader offer from a Freedom to Speak Up perspective for each of our colleagues within UHLG. So I'm just going to share just a couple of points out of the board report. There's a lot of detail in each of the reports, but just relating to strategic oversight and governance. Each of the reports now are group aligned, and they contain the same information within them, so they're structured around the same 3 core areas. We are due across Liverpool Women's and across LUG to have an MIA audit completed against both services, and we would expect to see the information come out of that towards the end of September. When we look at the moment. And then the National Freedom to Speak Up Reflection Tool for Boards was launched in 2023. At LUF, the board House Waters completed that and set out a series of actions that are listed within the pack. And given the structural changes associated with our move to the group model, it's been agreed that we'll focus on site level ownership, and going forward that each of the hospitals have and will complete the reflection tool for each of their organisations and then generate an action plan. following that. So from a love site perspective, Aintree, the Royal and Paul Green have now completed and progressed their Free to Speak Up reflection tools and action plans, and Liverpool Women's plan to complete theirs in Q3 and Q4 this year. DTC is a new site, is in early development. We're just, the diagnostic treatment centre, we're just looking at options. And it's just another key point to note. So just 2 key points to pull out is the difference in kind of champion networks due to the size of the organisation. So Love currently has 61 active champions who are still really keen to play a part in the future, depending on what that looks like. And Liverpool Women's have just recently appointed their guardian. So their guardian is relatively new. So they're going to be working together to look at what the future for networks and diversity and champions needs to look like to drive the Free to Speak Up agenda for police and organisation. And then just finally, so there's just a slight variance in training and awareness building across each of the organisations. And again, it's a piece of work that Free to Speak Up Guardians are starting to look at to consolidate best practice and bring the best of what Liverpool Women's have and the best of what Love have together so that we can build awareness around speaking up options, processes, and also train colleagues so that they feel supported to be able to do that. And that's the summary of the report and the key contents within it. And the board is asked then to note the assurance provided in each of the individual reports for Liverpool Women's and Loft regarding FTSE performance and development, and also to note the proactive collaboration that's happening now and what we'll do between Loft and Liverpool Women's as we start to prepare the future changes nationally and also to move into a group model.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Pat. So I think, just a real reflection around this area. I know we've got a Freedom to Speak Up Guardian all the time at Love, and what we have at the performance to guardians who it's a part of their kind of day job. And so some of that expertise that we've found from tying into that has really helped things like the reflection tool, which perhaps we wouldn't have known about or done had it not been for that support. So I think it's just to highlight this is one of those areas where we are stronger together.
And Beth, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Pip. I suppose what I was looking for out of the report, and I didn't quite see it, is, we have these people who are privy to a lot of really good information for us as leaders. And I suppose it was the so what, in terms of a thematic. What were the themes coming out throughout the year, and how has that affected improvement in leadership and practice? And I suppose that kind of, I didn't see that in the report. It was more governance related. So it'd be really good to see that, because I'm open to learn and see what's going on within our organisation. And I'm sure they've got a rich lot of information that they could be sharing, and perhaps we could put that in the report. Thank you.
Good point.
It was a very similar point. I think we can be assured that we understand the differences between our Freedom to Speak Up process and we're looking to the common process. But in terms of really understanding the information coming out of it, FTSE, you can't quite get that in the moment. So I think it's best to really sort out in the future.
Thank you. I'm the Free to Speak Up head, so just a couple of comments from that perspective. I think I would summarise Loft as a mature Free to Speak Up culture. I'd say Women's is maturing. I think the appointment of Sarah right alongside Sri is going to be really good. I think there's a fascinating comment within the Women's report around how you create a Free to Speak Up culture in a close-knit community. And I think we've got to work a bit harder to understand what that means for women specifically. I think in terms of best point, I think absolutely there's a real challenge within this about the integrity of the process and the operational intelligence and get out of it. So I think we're trying to push for as much stuff as we can reasonably get without compromising integrity around the impact of the financial and people challenges. If it gets too much around here's the data that comes out of the report, there's a fear that people stop talking because they'll think actually this is a management tool, not a cultural piece. So I think we are trying to push for some intelligence on that, but I suspect it's going to be more limited than what we might want. That's fine. But David, then Maxwell, please.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the report. But I Just reflecting on what Mike was saying there, I think I understand what you're saying there, but I think there is room to do a you say we did on some of the common themes to show that we are responding and taking the process seriously. As a non-executive, I take the fact that only 7% of the people who use the process wanted to remain anonymous. And that gives me great assurance that the process feels safe for our staff. So well done there. I also thought it was good to see the diversity of the champions network in the report. I think that, again, that's really good. And I support the idea of refresher training every 3 years. I think that's an extra proposal that needs to be followed up. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Natalie.
It was just in response to those comments, so just to give assurance that at a site level, I see an overview of the themes, what's raised by me individually with the staff when they are willing to, and it really helps to triangulate things like staff survey outputs to see where there's issues, and there's a number of things we've resolved from people speaking up and raising concerns. So I think absolutely, Lorraine in particular from a loss perspective has that information, so I'm sure we can look at theming that up, but just to give some assurance at a site level, we are briefed on that, and it forms a really important part of forming our people plan objectives for next year.
Thank you. So Sue, against.
That reaching people in the hard to reach areas within the trust, and particularly people working on night shifts. So it's easy for people during the course of the day to speak up, but we need to maintain that focus and ensure that we've got processes in place to reach other people as well. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So a number of points to take away, but the actions to take and the reporting going forward. Good discussion. Thank you. Thank you very much. Medical annual appraisal, we've got revalidation. John.
Thank you, Chair. 2 reports in the papers, and there's also as an appendix is the NHS Northwest submission, which requires sign off by Chief Exec, which summarises and provides more detail around some actions around the phrase of revalidation processes. The main message is clearly there's a difference in scale of 1,285 appraisals required and LWH 129. Both organisations very high completion rates, 92% across lots, in spite of the size, with 96% involved compliance and higher figures at both limits. And this is in lots in particular, it's against a background of significant sickness actually amongst the professional standards team and cover of absence of response officers. So in spite of that, pretty significant performance. The biggest challenge in recent years, the inclusion of temporary and fixed term staff, which is nearly 400. And so there is a slightly increased backlog of non-completed appraisals. And it's an ongoing challenge because it's a huge industry. And if you look at 0.25 PAs per 6 appraisals, which is kind of a national grid standard, you're talking about over £1 million to the appraisal process requires about £1 million plus of expense for an organisation of this level. So it's, in spite of the various challenges, I think the professional standards team in both organisations are doing a great job. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. Really important subject area for us. We track very regularly. It's all put together in these reports. Any points, questions, etc. John, satisfied with this?
Yes, I am. It's going well.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, John. We'll proceed. Right, next stage of the agenda with 2 estate-related reports: the Health and Safety Annual Report and the Fire Safety Annual Report. to join us. Straight on, no time to tune into the meeting. Okay, that's fine. I think I can go. Very good. You could introduce yourself and your colleague.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Paul Spackler, Director of Estates and Facilities. I'll have responsibility for health, fire safety. Stuart Crow's my Assistant Director of Estates for fire, health and safety and fire safety. So I realise you're probably running to time or just behind, so I'll try and keep it quick. But obviously here we've got 4 reports here today, but I'm going to try and cover it all in one go rather than flip from one to the other. Hopefully get through it all, and either myself or Stuart can answer any questions if there's any that I don't cover, any points that I don't cover. So yeah, 2024-25 health and fire safety annual reports, forward plans. There are 4 reports, 2 for each organisation statutorily, and also 2 reports for health and safety, 2 reports for fire safety, 1 for each organisation. So that's the 4 reports. Overall, in summary, during 2025-26, so since the date of these reports, the former Liverpool women's team for health and safety has moved across under the Luft and now the group team under Stuart's curtilage. That means we've got 1 team. So going forward, these reports will obviously be slightly more standardised. There's a few differences because the way they've been prepared. And Stuart has worked with Joe Downey and Diane Brown of the Liverpool women's team to produce the Liverpool women's ones this time. That change is sort of in progress. It's not been without its challenges. There were 2 members of staff in Liverpool women's, both of whom have not sort of responded particularly well to the change in the relationships in terms of that wider team. Stuart's working with the team, the Liverpool women's team, to sort of get them back. They're currently off at the moment. So Stuart's team here at Aintree is covering Liverpool women's as well. So that's working okay in that global sort of group sense. Generally speaking, the reports are given a good impression and a good view of the continuing progress that both organisations have made in various different areas, but not without some challenges. There's obviously more work to do, and that's recognised within the reports. Both trusts have had 0 enforcement notices from both HSE and Merseyside Fire and Rescue, albeit in both accounts we've had proactive dialogue with them with regard, for instance, the demolition of Liverpool, Royal Liverpool, and the Dental Hospital with some fire compartmentation issues. So we work closely with both their sort of regulators in this regard. That's all been helpful and good relationships. We've also now used the model for what is the Liverpool University Hospitals Estates safety groups, which report through Estates and Facilities Divisional Oversight Group. And they deal with matters around the HTMs and the technical side of various different aspects of health and safety and fire safety, things like water safety and the like that report through to David's group around infection control as well. And they're now in place also Liverpool Women's. So we've sort of mapped that across. And in actual fact, we've also worked with Liverpool Heart and Chest colleagues, and they've implemented the equivalent groups at Liverpool Heart and Chest, ready to sort of bring that, sort of marry that across as well at Broad Green into a single site. At Luft, I think this time last year, I think it's fair to say we had some challenges around engagement. The site teams, everyone was busy doing a lot of things, and attending health and safety meetings became something that was quite challenging to try and get people's attendance and engagement. But during the course of this year, that's changed quite dramatically. So with the support from the managing directors and also in particular the chief nurses for each site, who've now sort of driven that forward. And we're doing the same again with Diane and the team at Liverpool Women's to sort of make sure we get that continued engagement up to the trust, now the group, I should say, health and safety group. So we're bringing things up, dealing with site level, coordinating it across the group. And with things like that also, it's enabled us to work across the group, within the individual sites, and in particular for women's, where, for instance, we've now put some finance in place to do some fire compartmentation and fire safety works under backlog maintenance, which hasn't particularly happened in previous years, whereas in Luft we've had that investment through the capital programme. We've now got that in place as well this year for the women's and hopefully in future years as well.
I think it's fair to say that both trusts have got ongoing concerns with regard to violence and aggression, in particular around clinical areas and clinically related. And I think two years or so ago, I think we reported here there was a significant increase in the number of incidents at Luft. I think that's plateaued now. I think you can see in the report that that's plateaued over the last 3 years. I think that probably reflects what we felt at the time was a more appropriate level of reporting of incidents. And I'm looking at David because David leads the building kind of say the Love group, which is where we now bring violence and aggression into more of a sort of a holistic approach rather than seeing it as a security issue, which has been maybe one of the things we've fallen into the trap of in the past. And that again is being rolled out to Liverpool and extended into Liverpool. So I think we're really now into trying to drive them numbers down, make some change that's going to give that improvement, give a better quality environment for our staff as well when they're facing some of them challenges. So there's a lot of work to do there for sure. Stuart, David and Craig in security as a team are all working together with the nursing teams on that. Both trusts have low incidence on things like non-clinical claims. RIDOR, although we think it's perhaps a little bit of underreporting at Liverpool Women's, musculoskeletal, manual handling, non-patient falls and needle stick, albeit that in needle stick it's probably fair to say I think it's quite pleasing that we're seeing a low incidence of needle stick injuries in areas that are non-clinical, which gives good indication that we're getting a good management of sharps going down the right disposal routes, not going to the laundry or in the wrong waste stream, for instance, which we've had problems with certainly on this side with linen, receiving a lot of sharps embedded in linen where you don't want it to see. So that's a really positive thing, certainly from my perspective. A fight that's been fought for a long time to try and keep on top of that. Liverpool Women's, we've had some challenges with fit testing in the past. It's mainly, we believe, down to a lack of recording of results and trying to do that in a centralised way with a centralised health and safety team. And Stuart's been working with Diane now on sort of devolving that down to site to clinical groups to do that fitness testing, which is more what we do. So we've still got that central support, but we're sort of making the responsibility more local and they can do their own report and therefore not have them gaps in reporting that we see. So that risk hopefully that's on the risk register for Jenny's team is going to show soon see some improvement. We've also both got good results in terms of mandatory training, both in health and safety and fire safety. And there's been a significant improvement in the number of fire ward trainings been delivered. It's in the report, albeit there's a lot more to do there to get us to the stage where we've got a trained fire warden on duty in every area at all times. We probably need to see the number of around about 1,000 probably treble. So that's certainly one of the things that Stuart's got to try and improve the training programme. And then finally, just to say, I think the sort of fire safety team that Stuart's got, I think it's a real success story, a bit of a phoenix from the ashes, if you pardon the pun. And it's really been through a really challenging time in terms of the industry where post-Grenfell, there was a real shortage of really qualified and experienced fire safety officers. I think a lot of people left the industry because of the increased scrutiny and the challenges that came following Grenfell. And also those that remained were able, therefore, to sort of take the best jobs and also challenge themselves out at consultancy rates at high levels. Since Stuart's joined us, we've gone about recruiting our own fire safety advocates and we put them through a training programme. And we've now promoted some of those and they're becoming fully trained fire safety officers. And I think that's been recognised with a series of awards that we've already received, some more to come this year. And recognition through the health technical memorandum that we've reached level 1 in that regard, which is a real feather in a cap. And allied with the Rosper Gold Award, he mentioned silver for Rosper in here. We've now received Rosper Gold Award this year. I think that's all credit to Stuart and his team, what they've done to sort of develop the service and positions as well as that group model. I think it's something really to shine a light on to show that what we can do rather than having 1 or 2 people in each organisation, we've got 8. And they can really make a difference to the wider group. That was it, Chair. Thanks.
Question, thoughts, Tom, please.
Thank you for the report. What struck me as I read this was the non-clinical claims, and that we trust paid out just over £1 million in 24-25. I have no idea whether that's typical for this organisation or for an organisation of this size. So how does it benchmark against other years and against similar organisations?
Over the last couple of years, we've
paid around swimmer there, and that probably differs. There is a dashboard that comes from NHS, resolutions that benchmark us against particular areas, and we analyse that to our safety group and have a big focus in particular areas. But recently we've not seen a great deal. That can be skewed by one particular claim that's got significant value in there. Moving forward, we can put more detail in about what that looks like. But that's generally the norm there. We've seen numbers come down and down and down, and that's due to some of the work initiatives and mitigation that we've put in recently, and the time we spend looking at this and learning from incidents and making change.
Thank you. Paul, can I just ask you around the first part about the purpose of the report? And I apologise, it's a question I asked last year as well. It describes that there's adequate health and safety arrangements in place. For me, I would expect we were either meeting them or we're not meeting them. So can you give me a bit of an explanation around the word adequate? Thank you.
I'll try. I think we would say we are meeting them. I think really, I suppose it depends which lens you're looking through. And certainly, I think the fact that we've not had any enforcement notices, not had any prosecutions, we've got low levels of harm or incidents, I would say demonstrates that we have got those controls in place. And practically, I think in terms of trying to sort of quantify that and put some numbers on it, I think it's really difficult for a complex organisation to sort of put anything more than to say, yes, we're doing what we need to. As far as assurance levels is concerned, I will probably suggest that we've got substantial assurance based on all of that, but we're not sort of going to tempt fate, I suppose, a little bit.
Just to add to that, to achieve the Rosper Gold Award, demonstrate we've got suitable arrangements in place, which we've been able to do. And also we've got 2 MIA audits, which have come back substantial as well, which then again gives us that bit of assurance. So that helps to paint a bit of a picture there.
Absolutely agree with what you're saying based on what you've wrote here. It's just the word adequate I struggle with. So I just wonder before you publish it, if you can say that, stands in there because of, thank you.
And I think that some of the things that Stuart's mentioned there have come this year as well. So since this report, because there's a tendency to be a lag these things, obviously. So I think certainly going forward, I think it would be fair to say that if things stay as they are now, I would say substantial, probably a better word rather than adequate, certainly meet the requirements.
David, thank you. This is more of a comment than the question. So this is around the work around violence and aggression reduction within the organisation. So we developed a group of building a safe and kind of loft some time ago, and that's been great. We will get great attendance. It's very operational, and what we want to do is we want to move that forward and have a more of a small strategic group that will bring in leads from workforce, from health and well-being, from education, so that there's lots of work happening in all those different departments within the organisation. But what we're not as tight on at the moment is having a joined up approach within those different departments, that we can have a strategic approach of how we are going to look at our workforce and our better provision of a safer environment for our staff and obviously for our patients. So there'll be a proposal coming to execs or senior management board in the very near future. But I'd like to thank Craig and Stuart for their guidance and involvement in that.
Just in response to Tom's question, I'm proposed to take a paper to the next audit meeting, which gives a 3-year analysis on non-clinical claims, the reasons and the trends behind it. And if we can find benchmarking with it, that.
Thank you. We'll go to the next audit. Rob?
Just to comment, recently had the pleasure to present the States and Facilities Awards, and the National League for States and Facilities was really waxing about our work in fire safety compared to where we were in the old Royal. And the journey over the last couple of years, I think is all credit to the team's innovative techniques, not least the virtual reality, fire training, etc. is really kind of cutting edge. So just credit.
Thank you. Good note to finish on. Thank you very much. Report received.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much.
straight into the provider collaborative joint working agreement and committee income.
Yeah, just very quickly for the board, obviously this, previously, the board will be aware, we've signed it in 2022, last updated it for the joint working agreement, Cheshire and Mersey, the CMAS arrangements. Cheshire and Mersey has brought together its two provider collaborative groups, the CMAS group and also the mental health and learning collaborative. Both of those have been brought together in a new form. The work on the joint working agreement has been reviewed by chief executives with the support of company secretaries across organisations, and the revised joint working agreement is being reviewed by all boards in Cheshire and Mersey during September, and we're seeking board approval.
Thank you. Anything you want to add on this exciting item? Okay, thank you. Can we approve? No, sorry, Jenny, sorry.
No, it's absolutely fine. It's just understanding this if it's kind of effectively the same as it was before, just bringing together or bringing changes between what was in place and what's being proposed to us now.
There are no changes.
Thank you.
Okay, we approve this, please. Notify the relevant people that we are in support. The Group Strategy and Partnership Committee assurance report, Jane.
Yeah, I wasn't found the details on leave on that particular day, but the notice is self-explanatory. That's just my notes and share. I think everybody else largely was at the meeting.
Okay, intent to receive this, please. Thank you. Anything, Sue, from the audit committee?
Nothing significant, just to report on a couple of points. The data protection toolkit was prepared. 30 out of 41 outcomes were achieved, and an improvement plan was submitted to NHS England, which is in line with all other organisations. We're in a sort of similar place. The conflict of interest policy was reviewed for compliance, and we achieved 67%. That's an area we're going to focus on going forward to ensure that compliance improves. The internal audit recommendations are progressing very well, and we only have 13 outstanding at the last meeting. And just finally, we reviewed the terms of reference, and they were approved and are presented for your review and approval at the board.
Thank you. So the terms of reference properly aligned now between the two statutory bodies?
They do.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Can we approve those now, please? Thank you. Charitable Funds Committee Assurance Report, Mr. Christopher Morse.
Doesn't sit with me, Chair. I think this is a typo, so I think it's either a Jenny or a Jackie as members of the committee, because I'm not involved in that.
Okay, yeah, forgive me for coming to the name on the agenda.
I wasn't at the meeting, but I can take the report. Sorry, I skipped. Sorry, you have to turn to reference.
I think for brevity, Chair, that the report's self-explanatory. There was no recommendations other than noting the report itself, and the committee approved the revised operational plan. They were key things.
Okay, I'll come back to you, Jenny, after the report. Unless you want to add, we'll go into the LUF Audit Committee Assurance Report.
Yeah, all it's there as read. The only thing I just to highlight is that it does flag up that internal audit work was behind where we wanted it to be at this stage of the year. Had some assurances that MIA are committed to getting back on plan by the end of the calendar year, which gives us the assurance that we need. I have to send questions on the report.
Thank you. Any point, I'll go back to the previous point, I think, in terms of operating model, approach to internal audit, proper tracking, with the two audit committees, whilst that's totally separate, working well in line on that in terms of consistency in the audit work, which I appreciate. Thank you, David. Thank you, Sue. Any other questions on the audit report? Anything you want to come back on, Jenny, on that?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, covered a lot of ground as always. Thank you for your contributions. A lot of actions for us to take away, and through our governance structure, we'll stick tight to and move forward on. But it's James talked before about the risk categorisation. It links back to some of the performance framework stuff. We are working continue to work as a group in very demanding, and because of the complexity of the business we provide over the whole spectrum of services, by definition a high risk environment. It's a product of our history and pressures that we face today. The test for us isn't whether we're deemed to be high risk or not. It's how we respond to all of those things. And through the assurance and risk committee and through this board, I think we're well sighted on the risk. We haven't yet got the answer to every problem. We fully addressed all the challenges, but we know where we're at. We know what we need to do next. I think that's been demonstrated across all spectrum of business in this board. Thank you. We received in advance of the meeting 7 questions from members of the public. The best way for me to deal with this now is that we're working through the full and comprehensive answers to each of the questions. The questions and the answers will be on our website attached to these, could feature in the board minutes. What's the timeline for that, Daniel?
We're hoping to get them out very early next week.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair, like you say, we can ask questions to you later, or?
Yes, of course, though.
Oh.
Yes, thank you. Meeting closed.